Who loves that intro? Me, of course. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I don't know if anyone's joining us in an evening area. I would love to know. I'm Kristen Hancock. I'm with Ecology. I am so excited today for our June Ecology Presents session. I am being joined by, hold the phone, Ray Walsh. Look how I made that magic happen. Ray is, how are you, Ray?
I'm good, thanks.
Good, good. Ray is joining us from across the pond, as they say. He is now, would you say you're in the UK? No,
No,
you're in the
I'm in Prague. I'm in
you're
Central
in
Europe.
which is very exotic sounding to me in
hmm
Indianapolis. So we're trying out a new little time zone today for this Ecology Presents. Let us know in the comment section where you are joining us from. I would love to know. This is 10 a.m. Eastern. I would love to know if we have any East Coast or sorry West Coast people who are joining us at 7 a.m. You'll get extra bonus Ecology points if you're up at 7 a.m. watching this. And anyone else in the UK or over in Europe anywhere, I would love to know if we've got people joining us from there as well. So when comms goes rogue is our title for this. Ecology, I consider Ecology a little bit of a rogue organization. I was mentioning to Ray before we started that if any one of our Ecology members are going to be joining us in New York City in a week and a half, I guess, for World Conference, we're hosting a bit of a rogue party. So I'll keep that on the down low for now, but anyone's welcome to join us. Ray is my new friend and a new Ecology member. Ray, why don't you give us a little introduction about who you are and where you've come from and all the wonderful things that you're bringing today?
Sure. I am from the Midwest, U.S. Grew up in Iowa. I got my first comms job around 2000 in Chicago. That was with a now defunct IT consulting company, and they went belly up during the dot-com bust. I freelanced for a long time in Chicago. Eventually made my way to Europe, in Germany also as a freelancer. And once I moved to Europe, I worked almost exclusively in internal comms. So it was Dutch companies, Belgian, Swiss, German, all of them using English as a corporate language. And then I got a job with UPS in their European region headquarters in Brussels, and I moved there for about 5 years. And then about 5 years ago, again as a freelancer, moved to Prague, where I'm based now. I did work for a while for DXE Technology, giant global IT consulting company, and I worked briefly for Novartis, which is technically Swiss, but almost all their revenue comes from the U.S. But one of the world's richest companies. And I mention all of these not as so much my resume, but just the location. So whether the companies are North American or European, using English as a corporate language. There's one thing that I always see everywhere, and that is, I don't know if the slide advanced, I sketched something out here. These crazy,
Love it.
newsletters, that every company has them. And,
Yeah.
and the thing that they just make me secretly seethe with anger because my team, the team that I'm on, we have to go through 15 layers of approval, to get. And but some guy in the UK can just put
Right.
something out, sometimes even in print. And then I must say, well, I know you didn't go through a brand review because you've got the wrong logo. Did you go through legal? Does HR know what you're doing? No, no, no. Just think,
Amazing.
how is this even possible? So as much as we have a choice of using the carrot or the stick, as much as I would like to take a stick to this guy, but it's we just don't really, there's a huge risk of the company when these come out, I think, because they get
Absolutely.
forwarded, they're off message, the brand is all haywire. But I'm convinced that over time, we're not empowered enough to use a stick, so
Yep.
we have to use a carrot. And I think that the way around that is through let's enable them to create rather than trying to shut them down. And as I'll talk about today, I think from this international perspective, I'm really convinced that from an international perspective, it's really impossible to shut these down.
I agree. And I think that's why I'm so excited about this conversation today. Because even working in or the last corporate job I had was not international, it was provincial. And even then, there were things that came across that I found that I'm like, who did anyone approve this? How
Yeah.
did this get out there? Even within departments. And so, yeah, I think people are going to learn a lot. We're going to have a little bit of uncomfortable conversations, which I'm always here for. In the meantime, we've got some very exotic locales joining us today. Katie is joining us from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, the metropolis of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We've also got Omaha, Nebraska in the house, which is equally exotic. Princeton, New Jersey. Daniel's joining us. Erica is good old Central Time Zone. I will say this every day until I die. Central Time Zone is a premium time zone in North America. I miss it all the time. I came from Winnipeg, which was in Central Time Zone. I'm now in Eastern Time Zone. Everything is too late for me. It's very. I feel like I'm like it's too early or it's too late, depending on how you look at it. We also have Dan from sunny England in the UK. So it's happy afternoon for Dan, not happy morning, but that's okay. Welcome everyone. This is so exciting. I know that everyone in the chat will have comments, questions, probably some horror stories maybe about these shadow localization situations where something you've discovered is just horrifically off-brand. So please feel free to, I'm going to monitor the chat and the comments. When something comes up that's a great question, I'll absolutely bring it up. Ray will be happy to answer it. If something comes up that's a great story, I'd be happy to bring it up and we can chat about it as well. So in the meantime, I will let Ray take this away. I'm going to remove myself from this, but don't worry, I'm always lurking in the background. And I will let Ray carry on with his exciting thing. Like I said, share away. Here's a great thing. This is going to come up before I go. This is going to come up again. Daniel used to have a wall of shame to display examples of rogue communications at a previous company. I bet some made you cringe. That's really funny. This is going to be like a storytelling horror story kind of thing. So thank you, Daniel, for sharing that. All right, I will let Ray take this away, and I'm happy to monitor comments and chat. We'll probably jump in if you've got questions and things as well. So thank you, Ray, and I'll let you have at it.
Great. So thanks everyone for joining. For the purposes of this, we came up with the word rogue. I guess in my definition, as I'm defining rogue, is any kind of formal communication that doesn't go through any kind of corporate vetting at all. So I came up with a list of examples that I've seen, and maybe you've seen other categories of this, but I would say, business unit or project newsletters. In the last few years, there's a lot of digital transformation projects that may last a year or two, and they feel like they're important enough to warrant their own publication. Pop-up SharePoint sites. Similarly, we see a lot of this in Europe, especially. Local country have a need, which I'll elaborate on in a moment. But of course that is allowed in most companies anyway. And then a third category would be social media posts or, Yammer enterprise social posts. This one's a little bit tricky because we're asking them to do it. Sometimes, we do have that need to, ask somebody to take something down. I would caution you here for the European settings that might get you in legal trouble. I'm not absolutely certain of that, but in Germany, they have very prohibitive digital privacy laws, and any kind of imposition on their private life, it can really set off all kinds of, works council problems and other problems. So if you've got social media posts that you're trying to do something about, maybe that's a little trickier in Europe. So does anybody have are there any other categories that I'm missing here that you have spotted? Yeah, I see that. Yeah. My colleagues in PR have worked with that a lot. I haven't so much had to work with, external vendors, but although I did happen to meet personally, actually, there was a copywriter that we worked with externally. And a few months after, I found her, she'd made up a quote attributed to me using some terrible pun. Anyway, I was able to use the big muscle of UPS Europe, say like, I know you haven't checked this out with legal, so why don't you just take it down today? And she did. So, I mean, these rogue comms, I think it's more the phenomenon than the channel. And I think that our power within the organization really makes them especially challenging. So let's frame it a little bit. Why are they a problem? In my mind, it's the factually incorrect information. You get bad information that needs to be corrected. And this lowers the credibility for any official channel. That obviously we wouldn't want that, even if we're not personally responsible for it. I find a lot of tone deafness. frankly, business people, it's not something they study in business school, how to communicate well. So, how to write well. Seen a lot of cold-hearted comms from HR. I saw one memo that was like, you're going to be training your replacements, and the thing was full of exclamation points. Yay, this is going to be great. Or else you get like crude propaganda. My first job was, they said that, people work at March 1st because they want to make a difference. It's like, well, no, people work here because it's a good job and they get paid well. Let's not try to appropriate NGO language because, it's just, it lacks so much credibility. But this is usually where, I find the cringe factor is in just the poor writing. And then there's the brand issues, which are obvious. People aren't skilled in visual communications. I myself am not. So when you get something that's off brand, you're wondering to yourself, is this real? And I think it has that kind of phishing or spam feel. And I think that actually brings up an opportunity. Just as an aside, this is an idea on my part. I haven't actually tried it out, but it seems to me that one ally we have here is IT security, because they're trying to tell us not to click on anything that looks weird, that looks suspicious. And a lot of this stuff does. So maybe we can partner up with IT security and insist that things that go to, across the organization or to wide groups of the organization go through some kind of brand check. So we're training people about what real looks like. That seems to me an opportunity. So in terms of the branding thing or just outdated branding, which you also see quite a lot of, the language differences in a global organization really contribute to this. So what happens is, they get an infographic about the company mission and it's in French and it looks really nice, but it's 4 years old. And even though we're not supposed to use it, France still uses it because it's convenient. It looks good. It's in language. It's more or less on brand. So, they recycle old copy that's available just because it's in language, old templates, and after all, headquarters is very far away. So they just tend to do it. Leaders going rogue in town halls. I don't think there's anything we can do it live unless you've got some ideas. I think the best thing we can do is prevent it, with a really good briefing and talk about them with what they're intending to talk about and propose things that they could cover. But if you don't have that proximity to that leader, I don't know, maybe, I guess I'm brainstorming here and thinking out loud. I guess I would, after the event, ask that leader to elaborate maybe on if you've got enterprise social and what they mean by that. And maybe you can talk to that leader beforehand, before that post about, how they're going to kind of correct it themselves, because I don't want to come sweeping in like the police. And that brings up, this policing time, which is the last bullet on this slide. If we're to police all these communications, it's extremely time consuming for us. In my experience, we usually lose. It puts us in a negative light. And then people avoid us. They don't want to come to us because they think we're just going to come down like an elbow from the sky on them. And actually, in this international setting, 100% policing is unrealistic. There's just too many geographies, too many languages, too many channels. And, and also on the positive side, this guy who created the, All About Us news, this person wants to communicate, and that's a good thing. They're engaged enough to want to do that. And when I police, I feel like I'm really shutting down on what is actually a good impulse. So there has to be some other more positive way to go about this. So I think it might be useful to talk briefly about why these are happening. I think we can put them in a few categories. The first one is just people like creating. They just really like playing around and putting stuff out. So that's why I think these really aren't going away. And I've seen examples of them at every single company that I've worked with. And thanks to the gods for enterprise social, so that this creative impulse can, there's an outlet for it, and we don't have to fix things so much. But the other thing, the second bullet point is specific business units, specific projects, specific countries. They'll tell me they often feel that the global channel just isn't meeting their need. And at Novartis, there was this, I think it was a 2-year long transformation project. Their audience was about 40,000 employees. and they used Yammer, or at least they did at the time. And a typical Yammer post for them would get 200 views or something. It's essentially nothing. So I mean, they're right. Yammer isn't going to cover everything for them, but at the same time, neither is their newsletter. So I mean, we have to work together with them to come up with something to get more, to get broader coverage. Now, these first two bullet points, in my view, they can be negotiated. Unfortunately, from my position, I'm usually not in a position of power to force anything, but at least we have some wiggle room there. Hopefully, if we get it in time. But we have to be empowered. And if you have any insight into that, I haven't figured it out in my career. But the third bullet point is mostly from an international perspective, and this is why I believe we really can't stop these. First and foremost is the me stuff outside of the country, so outside of the headquarters. So things like payroll, expense reimbursement. These are often done on a country by country basis because banking systems are different, labor contracts are different. So these kind of things are administered and run locally. Employee discounts is a big one. When I worked for UPS, virtually the only thing that UK employees were apparently interested in were discounts, and they weren't even really good discounts. It was the kind of discount you could get at your supermarket with a couple of pounds off of an entry to a theme park or something. But that was where we got the most traffic every single month. But this stuff is very locally administered. So that me stuff, that pocketbook stuff, is probably going to be done by HR in a SharePoint locally. Also, related to this are the local HR needs specifically certain policies, certain procedures. Maybe they're by regulation, they have to make these available to employees. Very often in the European context anyway, I think also in the Americas and Asia, they have to be in local languages. And an example of this, of why these are absolutely needed, why these must exist, was when COVID broke out. I was helping UPS out again as a contractor when that happened. And in Europe, the first wave was you had different levels of severity country by country. You had different regulations, country by country, sometimes region by region. You had different interpretations of what a necessary or essential worker was, and UPS delivery people generally were. But the result was that we in the Europe region office couldn't really communicate much of anything that was accurate for all of Europe. It absolutely had to be done locally, and it absolutely had to be done. So, to have these kind of local SharePoint channels or some kind of local channel, it can be quite useful, especially in a crisis. And the thing about these is that they're often completely unknown to corporate. First of all, they're never going away. I don't think they should go away. I don't think we should even try to shut them down, but we don't know about them. And I think killing them is counterproductive. And the other thing that happens over time is that employee interest in the discounts and the payroll stuff, they tend to call that SharePoint the intranet, and they completely ignore our global intranet. So and then you get the guys with the all about us news, putting their PDF up on that SharePoint, and as a result, people just think of it as the company news channel. And they either ignore ours or are just unresponsive, unaware of it in some cases, or just unresponsive to it. So, the possible responses in my mind are two. We could police them everywhere, and for the reasons I just outlined, I don't think these are going away on their own. I've never seen a company that successfully eliminated it, although I've seen many that tried. But to police it, you need universal access. You'd have to understand multiple languages. You'd be constantly policing. And again, you'd have to be empowered to do it. And I've never experienced that. Now, replacing it may be increasingly possible with the technologies, some kind of app, which is actually, with a company like UPS, you got people on the road, although they're not supposed to be checking their phone while they're driving, which is why they don't have an employee app yet in Europe. But there obviously is some success. Retail workers, people that aren't wired. There's a lot of success there. But again, I think despite the promise of the technology, there's still so many varying needs with the locality, lots of versions, lots of languages, and centralized control of content is so difficult. And in fact, the internet technologies that we have are quite advanced. The technology is there, but I've never actually seen a functioning multi-language intranet. And I think the same will be true if we think of these apps and these platforms as global in nature. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I agree with that 100%. And somewhat related to that, you have these fiefdoms, and they have these strong fortifications. So at UPS, the sales force was really like a company within the company. And the executives didn't even want them. We don't want them wasting time reading articles. We want them out selling. So they had their own channel. And when getting into it was a negotiation. Once we got into it, it's a mess. I mean, the same problem we've just been talking about: way off brand, way off message on some key stuff. But we don't have the power. We can beg and plead with them to post something on their channel, but and getting them to change their practices. It was just a no-go. Sales had much more power in the hierarchy. Yeah, I think that's true. I think it really revealed a lot. It also, there were some positives in that. At least in UPS, what we found was that the locations were always so passive. They were always waiting for something to come tumbling down from the corporate office in Atlanta that was perfect for their situation. But it's a big company. They sell a lot of different products in different markets. Everything is different, not just language and culture, but just even the products that are available. And I think COVID was a wake-up call to local management that you are the communicator, you are the one that's going to straighten out any details. We can provide kind of advertising air cover to the high concepts, but you have to localize. You have to really make this particular to your people. So I think that was a positive. So I get possible responses, police them everywhere. Oh no, so I'm sorry, I'm repeating the same slide. So anyway, I think it's quite a challenge. So my point here today is to think about more the carrot than the stick. And I guess what we should do, I'm assuming most people here in this group are in the corporate headquarters, but think of yourself as an isolated communicator. You're on your own completely. And what would you need in order to put out content? And there's a concept called content operations that I rather like. It comes from, as far as I understand, the technical writing. This is an industry that's been putting out, support materials for decades, in multiple languages. So when there's a new, product release, a new update, it goes out in 17 different languages. So they're way ahead of us on this, and they've thought through it a lot. And they have this concept of content operations. And I think it was Anne Rockley who talked about, we need to think about content as an industrial model. We're a content factory. So we're not so much producing finished articles, finished magazines, and so on, but, components, pieces that can be modular, that other people can adapt and reuse. I also like this term of, I just learned it yesterday, geo-inclusive. So we have to think about places that read from right to left, for example, or people that have a slightly different aesthetic choice. Anyway, that's going down another rabbit hole of localization. But in terms of just the basics of what a local communicator would need, from us, I think they could really use a calendar in time to co-create. It takes thinking time. So to the best that we can do it, I would really like to avoid no more last-minute campaigns. They should have some advance notice of the kind of content campaigns we're working on. Gives them thinking time. It gives them, more opportunity to co-create and really think of local examples. Templates, I think, are a big category. These can be enticing for people. So this is a little bit of the sugar in which we're going to introduce the medicine, but they have to be easy to use. They have to be on standard tools, or tools that are standard to them. Sometimes in Europe, we've asked for the headquarters, can we get the source files because we need to translate it into Italian, and they send us InDesign files, and we don't know how to work with that. We don't have the software to work with that, and in country they certainly didn't. So standard tools, easy to use tools. An example of that would be the corporate this corporate slide deck, which at every company I've been with, what I see is usually a slide deck of like 300 slides, all the different slides you could possibly need. I don't think that's particularly easy to use. And I have to confess to worst practice myself. Rather than download it again, and pull out some slides that I might use, even though it does get updated all the time. I tend to go to the last PowerPoint and make a copy and start working from there. So I think templates can be hard to manage. People copy old versions. They just. But if we can come up with templates that are easy to use, attractive to use, I think we can kind of bring them into our fold, or at least see us as being, someone of value that they can consult with. And then the next point, key messages, now is the medicine. So what I'm looking for as a sole communicator is, key messages on commonly communicated topics. What are we saying today to the healthcare industry? Not everything, but just what are the main 3 to 5 top messages that we're getting? What are we saying to the automotive industry? Or what are we saying generally about our sustainability goals? Those are things we're talking about all the time. So we want to make sure that, these messages, because in headquarters, it changes quite a lot, quite regularly, but then it doesn't really get percolated out into the field for some time. So we have to think about how that system might work. Now, these content operations people, these technical writers, they often have tools to help them with that. And we may not be able to afford those tools. But even if we're just working from a spreadsheet, we have to think about what that process might look like for our organization. So in my mind, ideally, they are short, brief, simple, always updated, and translated. Because the problem is, if you've got if 3 people in Poland go to that key message map and they take the messages on sustainability, you got 3 different translations, there's going to be some differences there just based on personal choice. So ideally, you've got to translate it at least into your larger language groups. And this is really tricky, because now this is where the content operations people are way ahead of us. You got to manage translation memory, because the terminology, like I know with UPS, with its myriad products, which they do have. I don't know if you knew that, but they, like in the French market, for example, sometimes they translate it into a French name. Sometimes they just use the English name, access points. I don't know. That's what those delivery lockers where, you're going to pick it up on your way home. UPS access points. When they introduced that to France, they decided to keep the English. Now, if you send that content to an agency to translate it, they're just going to translate it word for word, and you're going to get, I wouldn't even know how to say that in French. Kristen, maybe you do. Point de Zaxis. I have no idea. But that would be kind of a mess. So so you have to think through what your key message map might look like for people in the field, and whether it needs to be translated, and how are you going to keep that updated. Now, the next point, when doing global campaigns. Now, I've been a content guy my whole career, but the more I see it, I don't mean to offend anybody here, but I'm really against global content and global campaigns. Kind of a generalized statement there, but I just see the global campaigns as having low readership, low impact. And I understand that they're not usually from us. They're usually from some executive, like, oh my God, there's a bunch of industrial accidents in India. We need to do a poster campaign. It's like, well, you've got posters. That's not, they're not cutting their hand open because they don't know that the knife is sharp. There's something else is going on. It's more of maybe an industrial management issue. But so it's usual. But nevertheless, we have to do the campaign, and now we're producing posters. But in the departments I've been part of, I would say 80% of our time is spent on content and campaigns, and then 20% on supporting specific groups or leaders with back end comm support. Ideally, in my mind, I wish we could flip that. I'd like to see us providing 80% of our time training leaders and managers and basically everybody on how you can communicate more effectively, and then 20% on content that could be used across the company. But if you are doing global campaigns, there's 3 things I would recommend for an international audience. First is do an early localization check. Now you haven't decided on wording. You haven't even decided necessarily on timing, but you got this general idea. We got to do something on safety. What might it look like? Check in with the countries, check in with the regions. If there's going to be problems with this, what kind of images are you thinking about? Oh, we were thinking about an infographic, and somebody might point out some issues with an infographic. I just came across one recently from Coca-Cola in Saudi Arabia. They did I have to think about the left or right here. I'm not sure how the camera will work, but it was a 3-panel like images, and it was a guy passed out in the sands, nearly dead, And then the next panel, he's drinking a Coke. And the third panel, he's springing through the sand dunes. The problem is in the Arab-speaking worlds, they read right to left. So what in their mind, they saw a guy springing through the sand dunes, drinks a Coke, and now he's passed out nearly dead in the sand. So we can avoid things like that by going early to the country. So just what are we thinking about with this campaign? So that's that would be the first stop. Then you can go and create your campaign, your campaign, your content. But when you get close, not in the 11th hour, hopefully, but provide a briefing to those stakeholders in country, the people that are going to help you deliver it. And you really can't just, some of those people might be professional communicators that are on your team or that you work with regularly. But some of them are going to be, somebody in marketing or somebody in HR who's just doing you a favor and helping you push this out. So you need to provide a briefing. Think of them as like an agency, an external agency. What would you need them to know? What's the purpose of this campaign? Who's the audience? What's the desired outcome? How are you going to measure it? And then, third, when you really get to the final stages, budget time for an in-country review. And this is what the localization industry says is just localization 101. Before things go out the door, have somebody in your company in country review this and see if there's any disasters that need to be, changed before it goes out. This wasn't really a disaster, but an example when I was at DXC with their, I can't remember the enterprise social they used, but they wanted to do just a fun, let's have people post pets of their selfies with their pet. And they did get a lot of people, posting this, but, there are parts of the world where dogs are not considered clean animals, and if on your enterprise social, you got people making kissy face with their dog, it's a little, maybe for them, it's a little bit alienating. In fact, it wasn't really a huge problem. I think by now people understand that in the West and North America, we love our dogs, but nevertheless, I think it's something, things that could be more sensitive, maybe like send us photos of your holiday, and you've got like picture, bikinis are going to be involved. In some parts of the world that can be offensive. So, and the thing about these check-ins with the countries is that this is actually an opportunity to engage them in the planning, and you get them thinking strategically about communicating and, what they need from headquarters exactly, and what they can do to help you. Getting on to the last things I think we can do. Train people in communications best practice. I mean, as much as I am against campaigns and global content, we know a lot. We know how to communicate. We know a lot of the best practices. But somebody did caution me once that best practice is a bit culturally charged. A lot of brands like white space, kind of a relaxed look around the whole, the visual look. But my publisher told me that in Taiwan, that's not a good look. They really like it dense with information and dense with text. I mean, that's just an aesthetic. So even our comms best practices can be, a bit charged. So we have to be somewhat flexible and somewhat trusting of what their choices are. Nevertheless, as we were talking about before, business people make horrible creative choices. I don't like blue. Well, that's the brand. So you don't really get to. That's that creative self-expression thing again. But so actually one solution to that in mind, again, this is maybe kind of ideal. If I were organizing a comms department, I would have some, because I have seen creative self-services at the headquarters in the US a few times at a few companies, which is good because we don't have those skills in the, in the regions or in the countries. However, there's just a lot of cultural things and time zone differences that it would be really great if you could have a creative services person or team or agency in the Asia region, in Europe, and then in the Americas. And that, they're going to be more aware of some of those cultural differences, and they're in the same time zone. And even if that person doesn't have the skill set that you need, at least they're going to be able to brief your brand, your design people intelligently about what's needed, for this subtitled video or whatever it is. But what I'm talking about here with the training and best practice is not just for our team members, but also for, just everybody in the company. This is, again, the sugar, how that we can bring them around to, us as a valuable, a resource. For example, how to do a video on your phone, turn it this way. Think about the lighting, the audio, all those things. Why does using the visual brand help you? How does it make your life easier? How do you source images safely without getting yourself or the company sued? Because a lot of business people aren't aware of that at all. And I think that this, and maybe we can not necessarily go through learning and development and HR. Maybe we can just do it on our own. Maybe we can just put it on, and hey, on Thursday, we're going to be doing a free webinar on how to use your phone to do a video. And this could also be a development opportunity for the people on your team, to put them front forward to teach people about how to source images legally. It's they can practice public speaking, they can practice, organizing their thoughts. I think that could be something valuable that we provide people in our organization. And how are we doing on time? This is pretty much, I'm wrapping things up here, but the face-to-face channel, I think that it's often neglected in organizations that I've been with. And I think it's the most important. So I think, if say at UPS we put out, and this did happen a fair amount, we put out a global communication about UPS access points, and those access point lockers aren't available yet in Italy. It's going to be next year or something. Well, the local line level managers can do a lot to smooth that over and explain to people, it's planned to come sometime, but this is a really important segment for us. This, B2C segment is really important, and here's why, and here's how we're addressing it in this market. We need those line level managers and influencers to smooth things over and contextualize and make things make sense to people. So we have to think about how we're going to feed the face-to-face channel, so to speak. And people talk about snackable content now. I think that's really snackable and also adaptable, not fixed. So and I know there's some risk there because they might make the creative changes that we were just talking about, but I think it's give them things that they can work with, they can use in their meetings, that they can do posts with. We're trying to generate buzz, so we have to make it easy for them. And if it's only in English and if it's locked into PDF only, that's not gonna be as successful. So if we put everything together on this slide, we're starting to build our own kind of content operations. And I think I might have mentioned there are advanced tools for this. I've heard of Acrolinks, never used it. I've also heard it's very expensive. But with this, you're allowed, with things like this, you can tag content. So it wouldn't just be, access point in English, but also in French and Italian and Polish or whatever, metadata. Same thing for images. So that when people are looking for images, they're not just, I keep going to UPS examples, but this does come up in photos all the time. You got the delivery person on what's obviously a suburban North American house delivering a package, and the houses just don't look like that in Europe, so it's obviously an American image. So, if you've got someone making a B2B delivery in a, cobblestone street in Europe, tag that for Europe, so that other, people can find it, that kind of thing is important. But anyway, we may not have those tools, we may not be able to afford those tools. So we have to come up with our own manual system, but it's something to think about. But we're getting into a content operations mindset, kind of a global awareness, kind of a geo-inclusive mindset. So that's, I think, and is this, oh, sorry, wrong window. So I just put up on the slide, and I can put this into the community in a separate post. I've blogged on this for Simply, if you happen to be a member of that group, Simply Communicate. Recently, I did something for Populo, goes into more detail on these kind of content operations. I would also encourage you to follow hashtags like content ops, content operations. Transcreation is a good one, because it gives you this kind of geo-inclusive perspective. And again, on this ecology post, I have some books, some other authors to follow, and I can maybe consolidate those into a one new post, if you don't mind my adding my own blog posts in there on these topics. And and also just feel free to reach out to me anytime. I love talking about this stuff. And even if I can't answer you, I might be able to point you to an author who knows more. I am interested in the global challenges of content and shadow localization and the challenges to that. How people can adapt content, how they actually do it, and how they should be doing it. And I do want to mention, a lot of what I've talked about today, has its roots in a book that I published 2.5 years ago, Localizing Employee Communications. The most information on the book in terms of reviews, description, look inside is on Amazon, although it is available on other places. And but not Amazon.co.uk. It's available there, but the information is on Amazon.com in terms of the depth about it. But I called it localizing employee communications, and I interviewed people like information architects, content strategists, designers. How do they deal with the international? What kind of challenges does that present to them, and how do they deal with it? So I put that book together. I do regret the title because it sounds like it's a technical subject. And actually, it's really about the human aspects of building a global network of communicators. How do we include them more often? What does professional development look like for a network like that? What do they need from us, and what can we expect from them? So I regret the title. Maybe it would be something like embracing and maintaining co-creation or something. But it's it should be available wherever, those online places where you get books, but it's available as an ebook, Kindle. I also recorded an audio book if that works for you. But that's all I had as far as remarks on co-creation, and I'd love to talk with you more about it.
Thank you, Ray. First of all, big gratitude from me. This was awesome. I got a couple questions here from the chat too. One of the things I appreciated most was the concept of communicators like myself giving up some control, and I think that's the scary part that we all struggle with. Fully admit, I feel like everyone who's in comms has a little bit of control issues going on. So I am absolutely in that camp as well. I something I'm working on all the time. One of the minor things when we talk about making content and templates and things usable for everyone. Very small things can make a huge impact. My last corporate job I had, we did a rebrand, and it looked beautiful. Okay, so it was gorgeous. The problem was the fonts that we used were not readily available in programs like Word. And we were dealing with people in healthcare. They were not dealing with the most up-to-date software all the time. There was no chance of them downloading new fonts to use, right? So it didn't work for them. So then we would get letters or presentations or whatever, and they looked terrible because whatever program was pulling in some ugly typewriter font instead of this beautiful new font. That part was a big fail on our part to not look at very simple technical things like font, so
Yeah.
yeah.
This drives me crazy, and I've never seen it actually solved. It doesn't help that when you open up Word, the default font is Times New Roman.
Right.
So I don't, and most companies usually go with, we have this very proprietary font, but it's only available if you spend a lot of money. So we ask everybody to use Arial, and that's usually in the brand guidelines. And then we open up Word, and Times New Roman opens up.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I think maybe, and I think I'm hoping with like Teams and the Microsoft suite getting more I don't know, compatible with itself. Yep. I hope we can solve this, but I really think the designers really frankly annoy me a little bit, because the design guidelines book is always really beautiful and interesting.
Right. That's exactly what happened with us.
It's like I don't know how to create this stuff. I can appreciate the visual specifications, but I don't know how wide a capital W is. I wouldn't even know how to kern on my computer if you paid me. I had no idea. So and also I think the IT folks. So how can we make these templates default? And I think it might be a three-way dialogue with IT, the designers, and how's this really going to work in practical terms?
Yeah. This is my partner in life and work, Chuck Gose. It's empowering to give up control. Apparently he's quoting himself, which is really a magical quote from him. If you know Chuck Gose at all, that he is apparently advocating for giving up control. So I will leave that. Leave that at that. Two questions that have come up here. I'm going to try and find the comment, but Zane was talking about partnering with IT, and I think that's why. Here we go. Any opportunity to become better friends with IT is one worth taking. And I think this feeds into what we were just talked about with things like fonts or default templates or whatever that is. I wonder if you have, some examples of that going well for communicators.
No. No, not really. I guess we have to think about what's in it for them, and what are the pain points? What are people doing that you really wish they would stop doing? And I think clicking on things they're not supposed to is a big pain point. Yeah. So maybe we can, maybe we can help you with that. There's, I'm not sure what they're
Well,
You know, they
let's
mostly
issue
just
the
want to get us
challenge
out of their
then
office.
for all of our ecology members or anyone participating here. If you have a phenomenal example of of a beautiful partnership with IT, maybe you're our next Ecology Presents host for our next one. The other topic that is happening a lot in the chat is about translation. So about the concept of translation, but also the software involved. And I wonder if you have any experience in tips or tricks or best practices with organizations that need to have documents translated, or now we're doing more live translation. So any ideas about that?
Yeah, so when I was researching the book, and I still read this from time to time in their industry, the localization industry, machine translation is just advancing super fast, and it's often built into so many tools. But it really, like English works pretty well with like most of the European languages, but when you go the other direction, people say it can be a disaster, like French. And the Germans complain a lot, but I'm not sure why. But anyway, it's changing all the time. But what I was told 3 years ago, and I think this still might be true, it's machine translation is useful for information. When I get a notice from the electric company here, and I don't want to read through it, I slap it into Google Translate and I get an idea, and it's a huge productivity boost. I don't have to go through my dictionary, and it's great. But that's information. That's, do I need to act on this, or is this just a marketing email? I don't really know. Huge boost in my personal productivity. But when it comes to persuasion, and that's where I think we're naturally good at, we content creators, that's where you want humans involved. So it can be a big productivity boost, but you wouldn't want to be pushing out machine translation to people without some kind of human interaction, or at least notifying people that this is a machine translation. We're hoping this is enabling, communication. If you have any questions, contact us, but never just leave them hanging with just a machine translation. You got to give them the source file, because they probably read English well enough anyway, and then the machine translation as at a minimum. But I think it's good to offer some, do that in-country review, and that's another thing that the localization industry is always advising: get that in-country review before you put it out. What's interesting is a lot of the tool, I guess like Workday and Salesforce and all these digital, cloud technologies that we're implementing, they often come with like, I don't know, 40 different languages supported or more. So the technology is way ahead of us here in terms of being able to provide a multi-language experience. And that's one of the other points in my book. I feel like we're falling behind in our kind of old mindset of command and control. Let's make sure it goes through a brand review, and let's make sure it goes through a language check, and let's make sure the executives are okay with it before we put it out. I don't think we're in that world anymore. I think it's very decentralized, whether we like it or not. So I would just think about the machine translation is a great tool, but don't rely on it. And if it's something important, or if it's something persuasive, get some humans involved in at least checking it.
Yeah, and a great point that I hope everyone took note of is if you are using machine or automated translation, then acknowledge that from the beginning, right? I love that idea of just saying, listen, we're using this automated translation for whatever purpose. Maybe this is a crisis situation and we need to just get something out ASAP. We're doing the best we can. If this doesn't make sense or you have questions, here is your contact person to follow up with. I think that's a great point for communication as well. Yeah.
One woman I interviewed for the book told me is in Belgium, and Belgium has 3 official languages, and they were a healthcare company, and they were putting out their internal comms in 3 different languages. And they introduced machine translation, and everybody just howled and complaining, this is terrible. Because at the time, it was like, this was probably early 2000s. It's like, what you're saying is like, we don't have the time to translate. You're not important enough for us to spend the money on this. But then, time passed, and then 5-7 years later, they tried again. And A, the technology got better, but B, people became more tolerant of it. They just, they had more experience with machine translation. And I think that's going to be happening too. People are going to have more experience with machine translation. But I do think we owe them an explanation.
Agreed. Absolutely. Well, this has been Most helpful and so informative. I have never worked at a truly global organization, so I think that's where I have this fascination with people who are dealing with translation of 20 different languages and all of that. So Ray is happy to connect with people. This recording will be available inside Ecology. It will not be available to anybody else. So if you are watching and you are not a member and you would like to rewatch this, please join us. Every membership gets a 2-week free trial. We would love to have you in our community. Ray, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. You can connect with Ray at raywalsh.net. He's also on LinkedIn. And as he mentioned, he's a published author. So maybe you want to grab his book as well. We are thrilled to be here again for Ecology Presents. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Ray. Enjoy the rest of everyone's week. We will see you again next time. Take care, everyone. Bye.